Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick. How is everyone going? It's high time we had a chat about Hyperspace, which is a new competitive game format for the X-Wing miniature game. Now, for those of you who haven't heard about this, Hyperspace is the name of the new tournament structure that is going to be replacing the regionals and nationals in X-Wing, but it's also a new format in which a certain segment of all the minis and upgrades and pilots within the game of X-Wing is either legal or not legal. Essentially, we have a smaller sample size of things to choose from. Very much akin to like a standard from a trading card game, if you guys are familiar with that kind of thing. And as it stands, this includes everything that has been released in X-Wing 2nd Edition up until this point, now being right on the release of Wave 2, including also the TIE Striker for the Empire, which will be out in the next wave. But the reason the FFG have included that ship as well is because the Empire would be short one ship if they weren't. At this stage, every faction has 4 ships, except for the Rebellion that only has 3, but the Rebellion has 2 expansions worth of X-Wing pilots, both from Source Renegades and just the regular X-Wing pilots that come in the core set and separate expansion. Now, in terms of the pilots, there is nothing sort of pick and chosen from those lists. Every pilot from those expansions are legal. But when it comes to the upgrades, things are a little bit different. Now, we had all the costings revealed for Wave 2 just over a week ago, and on those documents, apart from all the costings for the new stuff, there's an extra column on the side of each of these documents with Hyperspace legal, yes or no, which simply means if it says yes, it is legal for Hyperspace tournaments. And currently, everything available from X-Wing expansions, barring all the extended content, is legal. Except for the Resistance and First Order. They actually do get all of their content out of their conversion kits. Because they only have 4 ships each, even with the entire backlog of ships. They're much smaller factions, that makes sense. The one exception to that rule is there is one First Order upgrade that is not legal in Hyperspace, and that's the Biohexacrypt codes. Which is interesting. I made the comment when the points for this was revealed that it seems to have a lot of potential upside. Being able to jam a ship from all the way across the board, something you can only usually do at range 1. Being able to coordinate from all the way across the board, something very easy to do with this upgrade because you can target lock a friendly ship really early in the game when there's nothing else to target lock, basically not losing any actions that way. It just seems this card has a lot of potential power, and perhaps maybe in playtesting FFG discovered that, hey, this is really, really good. Maybe like on an Upsilon Ace kind of build, that works quite well. Be interesting to see how that goes in the game. But yes, that's the one thing from Wave 2 that's being released that is not going to be legal in Hyperspace. Now, apart from that, all the unique upgrades for crew and faction-specific upgrades in general, again, we're just talking about things that have been released in expansion packs. What is interesting is the generic upgrades, because not every generic upgrade is legal, despite the fact that many of these can be taken by current legal ships. And I think this is to address certain potential meta issues. Just going through this list quickly, the only cannon legal is Heavy Laser Cannon. Freelance Slicer, Gonk Droid, and Novice Technician are not legal. That seems to make sense. That's like for the YV666 and Jump Master. Those are specific to those upgrades, so that makes perfect sense. No bomber generators. All our force upgrades are available, all our gunners as well. Now, the illicits, we only have Dead Man's Switch and Inertial Dampeners available. And if the current extended meta is anyway going to inform this, we're probably not going to see many illicits being played at all. Indeed, it's also worth pointing out that a new faction is going to come in with access to these upgrades. With the Falcon on the Resistance, it does have illicit upgrades. So that's a bit of a shame. It would have been nice to see Contraband Cybernetics legal on that, but I guess once again that could have something to do with the playtesting, maybe the power level of that on like your Rays and your Hans. Just a bit too high. In terms of missiles, everything but barrage rockets is legal. Fair enough. It doesn't have any possible uses currently anyway in Hyperspace, so that makes perfect sense. Moving down to modifications, everything but ablative plating, advanced slam, and electronic baffle is legal. Electronic baffle being specific to the G1A Starfighter. And ablative plating, that's an interesting one because that would be very, very useful on the Resistance Bomber. So that is a potential loss for that platform, although it can go pretty well without. We still have Ferrosphere paint and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, not a huge loss, but it is worth pointing out the Resistance Bomber may be a bit hampered in Hyperspace. All our sensor upgrades are legal. Now, talents. This is something very specific I wanted to talk about. because in the talent upgrades, we don't have access to Debris Gambit or Saturation Salvo. Now, there's no real good targets for Saturation Salvo right now, but Debris Gambit is very, very relevant. The reason I bring this up is because if we take a look at all the top tier pilots currently in the extended meta, Whisper, Redline, Captain Kargi, Forlom, Palob Gul'dali, and Boba Fett. Boba Fett, out of everything I just mentioned, is the only pilot that's legal, and he's absolutely seeing his share of meta play right now. In fact, in terms of meta play, he is clearly the most played out of every pilot currently legal in hyperspace. But there are some key things that help make him work, namely Marauder and Han Solo, being able to take that red focus after you engage. The problem with that, and I've discovered this, I'm a scum player myself, I love flying Boba. The best way to use Han is to token stack with him, and you can't really do that unless you have other upgrades that help with that, like IG-88D or Debris Gambit, neither of which are legal in hyperspace. Basically means the only thing you can do with Han is get that one token, unless you take Perceptive Copilot, but that's a pretty big investment. A bigger investment than Boba usually likes to take. Now, it is worth pointing out that yes, he's not going to be able to fly alongside your quad jumpers, your Forlom, your Palob Gul'dali and all that kind of stuff, so maybe he'll have a home alongside cheaper ships, and that combo is a bit better. But the problem with this combo also is the fact that you don't get to token stack before the engagement phase, and that's another big factor. Boba Fett will only get access to that red focus action after he engages, which means he won't get to use it before he defends against Initiative 6s, or even Initiative 5s if your opponent outbids you. And that's very, very relevant, because going back to sort of meta pilot, we start to move down to like your tier 2 and 3 pilots. We're talking Vader, Luke, Wedge, Fen Rao, all of which are legal in hyperspace. In fact, every faction, except for the new factions, have an Initiative 6 pilots. The new factions actually have 2 each. And I think all of those are going to be relevant just as much as the original factions. And if that does start to make a serious play on the meta, then Boba Fett's in a bit of trouble. He is now going to have issues against things which might be flown quite heavily in the hyperspace meta. So just back to my original point, talking about Debris Gambit, it is very significant that it's not legal in hyperspace for that reason. And just finishing up some of the other omissions from hyperspace, we have no advanced proton torpedoes, and no dorsal turrets, which is a little bit harsh on Y-Wings. However, they do still have ion cannon turrets, so maybe that's okay. We'll have to see how that goes. But it might mean that either Y-Wings don't see much play, or they tend to lean into more torpedo-centric strategies, or more ion control strategies, who knows. Bit hard to tell. They're not seeing a whole heap of meta play, so it's a bit hard to tell what's going to prevail there. But I do want to have a chat about everything else that's legal as well, because there are some interesting things, interesting factors in the extended meta right now. And I do want to make this point very clear. Just because something does well in extended does not mean it will do well in hyperspace, with the example of Boba Fett, which I just mentioned before. Also, just because something doesn't do well in extended doesn't mean it won't do well in hyperspace as well. I'm looking specifically at TIE fighters, which are okay, they make good filler pilots in extended, but we're not seeing many TIE swarms, probably because bombing is so adaptive and efficient. It's not nearly as degenerative as it used to be. It's no longer the be all and end all, oh, you move there, you just die anymore. You still can counterfly it because of the timing of the system phase. It's made everything a lot fairer, but still with lots of platforms being able to drop both protons and seismics, your TIE bombers, your red lines, and your resistance bombers coming out soon. It does make it a bit difficult. Now, I will point out, yes, we do have resistance bombers coming out, but it is worth pointing out that there's no guarantee that they're going to do well in the hyperspace or extended meta. And that might help TIE fighters just see a little bit more relevance. Moving over to the Rebellion, and this is a faction that has really struggled in the extended meta so far. And look, it makes sense. We're talking mainly about junkyard builds. The Rebellion did lose a lot of their core strategies from first edition, probably because they weren't really doing what they were designed to do, like a lot of Alpha Strike and bombing and almost sort of like Scum and Imperial style builds were really becoming powerful in the Rebellion, and they were just doing all these different things, running super efficiently and just firing on all cylinders. And now, from 2nd edition, they've dropped from the top spot to the bottom spot in terms of meta play. But it will be curious to see how well they do in the hyperspace meta. I'm looking specifically at Wedge Antilles and Luke Skywalker. A couple of pilots that actually are doing alright in terms of extended play. If if you take into account all the rebel lists being flown. I know not a lot are being flown, but the ones that are often favour these pilots. Indeed, if we talk about the Oz Nats, which I made a video on just the other day, Luke and Wedge did see consistent play across all the lists that made the top 16, so that could be quite interesting. Again, I bring up Wedge being Initiative 6 because so many top tier Initiative 5 pilots are either hampered or not legal in hyperspace. Initiative 6 does become a lot more relevant. Even Luke at Initiative 5 with that ability with instinctive aim or supernatural reflexes, seems like there's a lot we can be doing with both of these pilots. And speaking of Initiative 6, I do have to bring up Supernatural Vader. He has lost nothing from his top tier builds. And again, we're talking Initiative 6, it's suddenly become a lot more relevant. Well, based on the pool of pilots, I think it's going to be a lot more relevant. And that's very, very interesting. Maybe Vader and your TIE swarms, all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure. By the way, guys, I really should point out, I'm usually way more analytical than this. I don't like to make sort of highly speculative videos. But I do find this very interesting. It's definitely got my mind going in terms of list building, because in terms of creativity, there is a very interesting thing the human mind does. Oftentimes when you go to create something, whether that be some kind of project or even an X-Wing list, the more you restrict yourselves, the more creative you become. I used to study music, and that was something that I learned early on. And it's definitely true of the Hyperspace X-Wing stuff. So let me know in the comment section, what do you guys think of all this? What do you think is going to be good in the new factions? What do you think is going to be good in the old factions? Let me know. I am considering doing some list building videos on hyperspace legality. I will say the Hangar Bay videos do take up a lot of my time as it is, and I do prefer talking about extended because there's simply more elements to talk about. It's more interesting, we have access to all the different ships, but if you'd like me to do some videos on that, let me know down in the comment section. Very curious to see what hyperspace does. Very curious to see what FFG do in terms of making things legal, how they take things out. Is there going to be some rotation system, or is it just going to be based on meta play and trying to keep certain ships relevant? All very cool things worth looking forward to. Anyway, guys, in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Reddit. Please consider supporting my Patreon. Thank you so much to all of my existing patrons. I'll catch you guys in the next video.